Welcome back to the Restoring Darkness podcast. On today's show, we are pleased to be joined by Dr. Sam Morrell. He is a postdoc researcher working between the Environment and Sustainability Institute and the Astrophysics group at the University of Exeter. He received his PhD in astrophysics from Exeter in 2020, where he researched techniques for measuring the properties of stars. Since then, he has been working on combining measurement techniques with computational models to predict the characteristics of artificial light at night and just above ground level in locations and at scales that humans and animals experience it. He wants to develop quantitative models to better predict the ecological impacts of our rapidly evolving urban lightscapes. This is going to be a fun one for Mark Baker and I. I can tell Mark's already getting fired up. I can see it. Before we
Let's
get
go.
to our conversation with Dr. Sam Morrell, I want to invite you to visit restoringdarkness.com. That's our website for the podcast, and it is also the website for the Lighting and Darkness Foundation, which funds this show and all kinds of great work at the front lines of the lighting industry. That's right. So if we're going to have darkness restoration, if we're going to have night preservation, if we're going to have beautiful starry skies for all the living things on this planet, we need people on the front lines to mitigate between light trespass disputes, light pollution situations. And the Lighting and Darkness Foundation is 70 distributors and 25 manufacturers have created lighting manufacturers. And we are going to do just that, along with creating educational programs, producing this podcast, and creating other types of awareness. So go to restoringdarkness.com. You can donate to the foundation by clicking the donate link. Why not become a monthly donor? We already have one. That's right. We got one monthly donor already. Believe it or not, it was so exciting when we got someone once a month. Every month they give $10. Man, if we could get 1,000 of those, the work we could put together, I'll tell you that. And I'd like to invite you to visit the Soft Lights Foundation. Mark, is it softlights.org or .com? I keep forgetting.
.org, please. Yes.
Softlights.org. Dr. Sam Morrell, welcome to the Restoring Darkness podcast.
Thanks very much, Michael. It's an absolute privilege to be here today. So thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah. Well, I'm very interested in these quantitative models. Okay. So you're actually creating what we would call renderings of the light levels at the level of the Earth, and you're showing this as light pollution, or tell us exactly what it is you're doing.
Okay, yeah, sure. Um, so I'm kind of responsible for developing radiative transfer models for urban environments. So um, our first piece of work using this model is actually basically a neighbourhood in the city of Exeter in the UK. And so what we've done is we've got a very long straight roadway, and we have the realistic streetlights placed along it. So we're modeling basically with the spectral characteristics of the streetlights, with the photometric, light intensity distributions of the streetlights, and we essentially we're using a method called Monte Carlo radiative transfer. Sounds hideously complicated, but all you have to all you have to know is that we are essentially emitting photons from each of these light sources realistically, as you kind of would do with statistics into the environment, and we're letting these photon packets probabilistically move around and propagate and interact with the environment. So we have all of the buildings in there. We have the roads in there, and those buildings and roads realistically reflect and scatter the light based on the materials in there, based on the um, the kind of the red brick material of the buildings as well. And the nice thing about this is that we actually do this in 3 dimensions. So we have a 3 dimensional grid where you have like volumetric pixels or voxels in there, and through each grid element, through each voxel, we record how many photon packets travel through, and we can build up basically an idea of where the photons are concentrated within this simulation, and we can build up an energy density map in 3 dimensions of anything we simulate. So that's like a very quick overview of the modeling that we're doing at the moment. But the nice thing is that this modeling is really, really scalable. So we're doing a city street at the moment, but we could scale up to a city scale simulation with all the street lights in, for example, and that could give us a 3-dimensional idea of where the light ends up in a whole city. Or we can kind of scale the resolution of the simulation down, and we can get a larger area. Or we can the code that we're using was originally designed to be used in say diagnosing and treating non-melanoma skin cancer. So we can do like very, very small simulations as well. So that's kind of a summary of the modeling that we're doing.
Mark, Dr. Morrell is building the light pollution matrix, right? The matrix? It's the light pollution matrix, right? So he's using photons to render photons. Okay, so, but what really popped into my head, Dr. Morrell, when we were talking about this, is what a great way to plan lighting control systems. Like if you wanted to plan out and like lay out a lighting control system, you could definitely program that into your model, I would assume, where you could say, yeah, like we have the sensors here and this is the lights go off and this is how it works. And if there's a bat migration or a bird migration, you can turn down the lights using this. And these are the ones that are going to go off and we've rendered it here for you. So make it happen in the real world. You could definitely do something like that within that program. Could you not?
Yeah, we could do something like that. So we can, the really nice thing is that we've got basically, we take in realistic LiDAR data, so we do the terrain. We take in building footprints, so we do the buildings and everything. So we can do that all realistically with the correct materials, but we can change out the lights. So in the work that we've done recently, we have like the real light simulation, and we have switching codes that we can put into the generation code that can I want these lights to have this switching regime, so they go off at say midnight and come back on at 5:30, for example. Or you can kind of have them very, very responsive and have custom switching codes.
They're dimming down.
Yeah, you can dim the power.
Tune them to warmer color temperatures, stuff like that, I bet too.
Yeah, exactly. We can switch them, but also the really neat thing is that we can just go, right, let's hypothetically say we remove all the lights and put in a whole different lighting installation with different spacings,
sure,
or different arrangements. So we can model as well as we can with the realistic simulation. We can model the hypothetical ones as well and see what the energy density in the environment is.
So did you create this program the same way like Google created Street View, with that car going around and it's got the thing spinning around on top of it or whatever?
Boy, do I wish we had that kind of budget. No, we didn't. So we're just literally using publicly available data. So there's a UK-wide LiDAR map. We're just using like publicly available 1 meter resolution LiDAR data. And there's a product released by the UK mapping service called the Ordnance Survey, called Vector Map Local, and that gives us our building footprints, and then that gives us our road network as well. So we can reload in the road network and we can place lights along roads as well. So it's all just publicly available data. So.
This is why I often advocate, Dr. Morrell, that light pollution is the most solvable environmental problem. Like you can literally model it and make it almost accurate. And to build the software to manage a city's lighting system so it was environmentally friendly. So let's use that term instead of like just dark sky or night preservation. But it was an environmentally friendly lighting system that you could create. You could do all sorts of things with. The software code to do it in your program and in real life would likely be the same operating code, would it not? Like you would demo it, you would create it in these different functions, and you'd run them through these simulations that you create, and then you just take that code and you plug it into the actual lighting in the environment out on the streets, and so you have like a place to play around and see what happens and make mistakes with the controls before you actually deploy them in the real world. That's what excites me about what you're doing.
Yeah, no, effectively you can. And the really nice thing is that because the project is kind of focused on the ecological piece as well. So we're doing the modeling piece, but we're trying to make connections to the real world where we can, and to actually use those models to probe the effects on on animals moving through the environment, on humans moving through the environment, on populations of animals that are moving through the environment as well. So we're hoping to have an entire toolkit for simulating both real and hypothetical. As you say, you can test out different switching regimes, test out hypothetically, if I dim these lights during this migration, does it give me a dark corridor through the environment, for example, that this particular thing could move through? And you can do it in 3D. So yeah, you could just put that code straight in and it would hopefully work.
You get a lot of the
This
bugs
is
out of the way. That's what I mean.
Yeah, definitely.
Dr. Morrell, this is really incredible. I wasn't expecting this on this show. I'd read your profile and some work you're doing, but this modeling thing is like amazing. And as Michael and you have both suggested, wow, the real world implications. So the Soft Lights Foundation tries to advocate and convince cities, mostly in the US, but to not install, for example, 4,000 Kelvin LED streetlights. Effects on glare, the effects on wildlife, the impacts on human health. It's terrible. But they don't listen. If they had your program and you could show them a comparison, and I'm thinking right now, if you connect it to some sort of a health database to show the impacts, like there was just a study came out that artificial light at night increases the risk of macular degeneration. Outdoor artificial light at night increases the risk of our eye disease. That's sort of astonishing. We know there's lots of other health effects, but actually this street lights can be impacting our eyes. So if there was some sort of connection and you could show and model, say, okay, look at what's going to happen in the next over 30 years, this many people in your town will now have macular degeneration.
Yeah, that's a kind of a dimension that we hadn't really hadn't really considered. We've been focusing just on getting the simulations done to show the immediate
Yeah, I'm
kind of
sure.
how the
Right.
how
You're at
the
the early stages, and I'm already launching you into like the next whatever. I'm going to keep you busy for a while here, but
yeah. I mean, please
it's
do.
just such
Right, that's great.
okay. I had a question. Do you mind if I ask you a kind of a technical question because we are struggling with the LEDs? So
Please
the
do. Please do.
LED lights are a directed energy, and we have
hmm
not seen the modeling software capture that. The intensity
Yes.
in small spaces is really dense. This energy density that you spoke with. Are you
hmm
do you know if the software that you guys are using handles the difference between what we call a flat surface emitter like an LED versus a curved surface source like high pressure sodiums or incandescent light bulbs?
Boy, asking the easy questions.
Yeah,
Can you
and if
render
you
glare? I think that's a better way to say it. A simpler way is, can you
Yeah, yeah.
render glare?
So
hmm,
I mean, we're still trying to get the actual, to get an image out of it working. So just preface that by saying that we're not at
all
the
right,
moment getting images out like as you would see them. We're working on it. We've had it working before, but we're kind of implementing new features. Um, but essentially, if you can emit the photon packets in a direction and you can collect them in a grid, we can get down to as low a resolution as you need for that grid. So we're doing 1 meter resolution for this simulation because it's say a kilometer by 300 meters by 70 meters high, something like that. But if you had a single light source, or you had or you knew exactly what you wanted to model, you could take that grid down to very, very, very small sizes and find out where that concentration of energy ended up in coming from it. So you could see where the streaks of photons come off of your light sources, and that would give you an idea where the glare was. But to answer your original point, we emit from point sources in the work that we've done so far, but we can emit from curved surfaces as well. So we can say take this photometric data and emit from this curved surface with this spectrum, and it will let you kind of emit however you want to off of this mesh, this 3D 3D surface.
How do you define what the spectrum is? So we know that LED streetlights have like high blue spike, almost no red, versus a sodium, what you guys think call a SOX over there, um,
Mhm.
is
Yep.
an amber spread, and then there's like the LEDs that have narrow band amber. How do you tell the software which kind you're using?
Yeah, I mean, we literally just feed in a spectrum, an emission spectrum. So
Wow.
if you've got a manufacturer provided spectrum, or we're thinking you could fairly easily model an LED spectrum of a given CCT, for example, if you can feed in a say wavelength by intensity spectrum, we can model the spectrum.
Wow,
Hmm.
that's pretty cool.
It is.
And so is the range visible light? Do you go into ultraviolet or infrared?
The nice thing about the model is it's completely it doesn't use. Oh, I'm going to get this the wrong way around. We use radiometric intensity, so it works entirely in radiometric units. So if you can emit infrared, it can propagate infrared. We might miss out some of the kind of the really really complicated optical parts, but if you have say materials where the reflectivity can go into the infrared, or you can define the properties of materials that it's traveling through in the infrared, then it should handle infrared fine. It's just that the lights that we're using have the classic say 300 to 800 nanometers spectrum, so that's kind of what we're emitting at the moment.
I'm going to jump in here, Mark. Um, in there, you talked about how humans and animals experience light, and at that level, how do we know how we experience light? And then how would you render that, or how would you model that?
So this is this is something. So we've done a piece of work recently on a paper where we basically it's called Changing Street Lighting Schemes and the Ecological Availability of Darkness. It was accepted last week, so it's hopefully going to be published soon. Um, but the thing about that paper is that we actually take our 3D grids of data, our energy densities, and we take off planes that are like a certain height above the ground. So we do ground level, 4 meters and 10 meters. So roughly corresponds to where say a hedgehog or something would be on the ground, and maybe where a bat or something would be just below the street light line, and maybe a bird or something above the street lighting, so we can see what the reflected light is doing up there as well. And in those simulations, it's just we don't really regard the spectral characteristics of the light when we're simulating animals moving through that environment. We set them going and say, right, you will avoid light above this energy density. So if they try and go through an area where the light hits this energy density, they avoid it and reject the movement basically.
Mm.
But there's some really nice work being done by Travis Longclaw, who I'm sure you and many of your listeners will be familiar with, where they've recorded a load of spectral responses of animal vision, basically by considering the
Mm.
cones and rods in the eye. So what we're thinking we can do is just um, take the photon kind of the wavelengths of the photon packets that are emitted into our simulation, and then run them through, convolve them with the animal spectral responses of the eye, so we can actually see basically how much energy from photon packets ends up being actually received by the retina in the eye that we're considering.
The ecological availability of darkness. You see, this is oftentimes that was a phrase that you used when you're saying, this is why the term dark skies, I don't think really covers what this movement is about. Now, when you're saying that you've making these rules about whether the animals will penetrate areas with different kinds of light in it, what do you mean when you talk about the ecological availability of darkness, is that something that humans get as well? Are we missing the ecological availability of it? Are animals missing this? Are they avoiding it? Are they moving towards it? What does that term mean, and why did you use it?
Well, so the simple question here is, it's considering, how do we model this in a way that we can actually probe which darkness in this environment is actually ecologically relevant and ecologically interesting, which would be useful for animals, for example, to be able to move through if they were nocturnal and photophobic. Um, as for uh, as for kind of the broader context of that question, we've only done a very, very simple treatment of that in
Mm.
these simulations. It is literally just a, um, does does the brightness that's in this, does the darkness that's present in this simulation allow these walkers, we call them random walkers because they randomly choose a direction and then walk to each pixel effectively. But the question that we're asking is a very simple one: does the darkness that is present allow this walker to make it across the road? So, do we, with this lighting environment, with this particular technology used, with this spacing of lights along this road, do we allow um, the the very simple modeled animals, the random walkers, do we allow them to cross through in areas of darkness? And so that's just one, as you said, that's one dimension of what is the ecological availability of darkness. It's about the spectral composition of the light. Um, is it too blue? Are things that are more blue sensitive prone to being kept away by LED? Are things that are more red sensitive prone to being kept away by high pressure sodium, for example? Um, are things that are easily attracted to light, do they get caught up in those light areas instead? And so these are all things that we're hoping to be able to kind of model in the next generation of the work that we're doing, to be able to actually answer some of those questions. What are the available dimensions that we can test for the ecological availability of light, and how does the light setups that we have in our urban environments, how does that ripple on to the ecological effects effectively?
Hmm. Wow. So do you model into it the phases of the moon, clouds, this kind of stuff? Is there cloudy skies? Can you say make it cloudy tonight, even though there's a full moon, or whatever? Do you have these other types of moonlight, starlight, photoluminescence? Is all that stuff planned to be in the program?
Not yet, but yes, we're working on it at the moment.
Okay. Wow.
So we have
Doc,
we sorry, go on. Let's go on.
no, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I'll continue. I was wondering if is this. I'm just fascinated by this. Like this is so important. Um, are you the only university that's doing this modeling? And is anybody else doing it? Is it your idea? How did this happen?
So I'm not going to claim the credit that we're the only people doing this kind of modeling, because there's various different pieces of really, really beautiful modeling work going on all around the world at different places. Um, but as far as I know, we're the only research group who's currently working on the Monte Carlo radiative transfer um, a method of doing this. And that comes partly from the fact that the project that I'm working on at the moment, as you said, I did a PhD in astrophysics, so I'm coming across to the ecology side of things relatively recently. But the really nice thing is that a lot of the problems facing studies of light pollution and artificial light at night in general require a lot of the same skills that astrophysicists employ on a daily basis, being able to actually look at a light source, quantify how bright it is, quantify its color objectively without kind of bearing in mind the human vision response, photopic or scotopic vision.
Hmm.
So the really nice thing is that Monte Carlo radiative transfer has been used for both medical imaging and in astrophysics for decades. Um, so there's a whole a load of expertise in MCRT in the astrophysics group at Exeter, and there's a whole load of geography and ecological expertise at the Environment and Sustainability Institute. So this is one of those nice places where the interdisciplinarity of it has kind of made us look at it in a slightly different way. So I'm hoping that this modeling is a kind of lateral take on how to do it.
I'd like to ask you about activism. The House of Lords Science and Technology Committee recently, last year, um, did some surveying and got some feedback on light and sound pollution, both. I commented on it, people that I know commented on it. And then recently, they have called for, wow, we need to do a lot more work to get light pollution under control and to get noise pollution under control. The government in the UK, though, is not that interested. Um, your program seems like a perfect fit. I know you're just barely inventing it, but it seems like a perfect fit for something like this for the government to have in their hands so that, so it becomes, instead of just sort of talking about light pollution, oh, it's harmful, it's bad for us, it's bad for the animals, to actually show like this is the actual harm that's occurring that they love. There's a lot of people I think on staff that love the modeling and can play with the computers and stuff, and they can show it what's going to happen in the future. Wow, to predict the future is really something. My question is about I know a lot of scientists and researchers want to stay away from activism. I've talked to some of them. They don't want to, like, they don't want to be polluted by an agenda. What's your opinion on your work and your opinion? I know that you have students and such. What's your opinion on activism in the work that you do?
Oh, asking the loaded questions there, Mark.
Oh, sorry.
So I mean, I think to a certain extent you don't start working on something termed light pollution unless you do care about kind of trying to improve the problem. I don't think anybody who's working on climate change, on light pollution, on any kind of pollution can kind of remain impartial to that, because they're interested in it enough to work on it. But equally, I do agree that you're in a really tough situation if you're really you're trying to present objective quantitative results that are meant to prove a point without any kind of bias in them, and it's very difficult then to separate that from the activism, because then if you are known to be really active in activism for or against something, it then kind of colors how your results are perceived by both sides, right? So in an ideal world, we'd like to do what we can, but I can definitely understand the wanting to remain as impartial as possible.
It's interesting that when you talk about other environmental issues like plastics in the ocean or climate change or pollution of any kind, oftentimes the industry creating the pollution has a vested interest in propagating or preventing the solution to the problem. So, for example, if I'm not going to get into climate change because I know we know that light pollution. I know a lot about light pollution. I don't know a lot about climate change. Okay, and I'm kind of a little bit suspicious of some of the motives in that movement. There's a lot of things in that movement that strike me as also a business interest. You understand what I mean when I like they're masquerading as someone that cares about the climate when really they want to sell windmills or solar panels or what have you. Okay, so I'm a little bit suspicious about what goes on over there. I know a lot about the lighting industry, and I know almost everything that goes on in this industry. Okay, but unlike say oil and gas, so if people said hey, we're moving away from oil and gas, like these companies are going to lose billions of dollars in investments. Okay, so like if we actually found a solution to get off fossil fuels, there's like the stock market's going to go way down in the energy sector, and certain companies are going to go bankrupt and all that sort of stuff. When it comes to the lighting industry and this issue, the lighting industry acts like an oil and gas company with respect to the light pollution. But in reality, I think light pollution mitigation, Dr. Morrell, represents the largest single opportunity for revenue for the lighting industry. It's actually the other way around. So it's not like another industry like the wind industry is going to come and eat our cake. The lighting industry is going to have to fix all these problems. The lighting industry is going to have to make the light fixtures. The lighting contractors are going to have to install and commission the new fixtures and connect them to the lighting control systems and train the lighting controls integrators are going to have to train the people at the town to monitor and program their lighting control systems. And so like this issue to me is different than other environmental issues in that the lighting industry should align itself with this 100% because there's so much money to be made. I mean, I can't think of a better case for advanced lighting control systems than in what you're talking, in the research work you're doing, in the program you're doing, and planning it out there, and then actually deploying it in the real world. I can't see any place that it works more than in the town of Exeter or Chicago or Toronto or Washington, D.C. or any other big city in Europe or Canada or America. I can't see any other place. The lighting industry is set to make a fortune on this, Dr. Morrell, and I don't understand the resistance. And if we can get the lighting industry on board with this, we can make a huge impact. It would be like saying that Exxon could solve the climate crisis. Like imagine that you go to Exxon, hey, just make more gas. Just make gas a little bit differently, and then there's not going to be any problems. Like literally that's what it is. And so I really want to convince the lighting industry to join this movement. And I think your models are a great way to get them involved.
Yeah, no, I agree with what you're saying there. Like it's one of the few places where the solution, the problem is also the solution, right? But it's about making informed decisions about the lights that you install, making them suitable, making them appropriate to their use, making them, or just being aware of the other implications when you're installing lights and when you're setting them up, basically. So I mean the fun thing though is that fun I say. The interesting thing is that there's no unmitigated win here. So regardless of which lighting technology. So one of the interesting things that we did in the work that we're doing at the moment is we tried to basically do exactly the same setup. So we had different separations of streetlights along a road, but we tried to just replace them with place down all LED of one kind of streetlight, or all high pressure sodium, or all ceramic metal halide. And the interesting thing is that in that situation, none of the lighting technologies had an unmitigated improvement in the results that we got from our kind of random walks going across the road. They all had a trade-off. So it's about making the correct trade-off in the correct situation, in the right context. It's all about designing it holistically, being aware of the environment that you're installing these things into, and that is the hard bit, right?
So I'm gonna say something, and you're probably going to be shocked by this, okay? But I'm going to tell you that I don't believe there's anyone in the world that knows how to do exterior lighting correctly. I don't think we know how to do it yet. And the kind of stuff that Mark's working on from Softlight's perspective makes me go a lot. And I don't necessarily agree with all of Mark's positions on different issues. And if you listen to this show in the last couple months, you'll notice that Mark and I disagree on some things. But that's okay. But what I'm saying is that I think we need to start from a perspective of humility. And we need to move into this space saying, okay, this is what we know now. Instead of a lot of times we come out as an industry, no, this is the lumens per watt, 5,000K lumens per watt. That's the most important thing because, we're going to use the lighting industry as a hammer to hit the climate change nail, right? Because we need to have maximum energy efficiency and that's all we're going to accept. And we get these tunnel visions on. We need to step back as a species when it comes to this issue, because I know a lot about this issue. We need to take a step back and say, we really don't know what we're doing. We need to get together a lot of people like Dr. Morrell who can help us model. We need to get together with some people from the Soft Lights Foundation. We need to get this IES glare committee to finish up their work on how we're going to measure the glare from LED lights, which is ridiculous and everybody knows it's true, but no one can really quantify it because we don't have any measurements. And we need to be very humble when we deploy. And we need to say, hey, this is our first step towards a sustainable or environmentally friendly exterior lighting system. And that's what I would advocate for, because we need to learn a lot, Dr. Morrell. And I love what you're doing because I think it helps us. It helps us, gives us a playground to play around a little bit.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that, and I agree. Like I try to remember I don't know anything. In fact, I know very little. I just know my little corner, my little modeling
Sure.
corner of the world here, and it is, as you say, part of a broader problem. We do need to bear in mind that lighting design is as much of a science as it is an art, and vice versa. And there is, to a certain extent, some subjectivity in the in the art of lighting design, in making the right decisions for a given environment. But I think what we're wanting to try and contribute to this piece, to this narrative, is to try and quantify whatever some of the important things to build up a body of evidence that then help to provide the guidance, provide the feed into policy pieces, and provide the guidance that then lighting industry professionals can then be confident and build upon, and then do their really valuable work. So that's what I'm hoping is, as you say, we can contribute towards the modeling, we can contribute towards the research piece, and trying to understand how the ecological effects of light couple into the lightscapes that we have in our urban environments, and then hopefully um, feed that back into policy pieces and help move the narrative forward, I think.
Dr. Morrell, I will tell you that I am an activist. So I'm not shying away from that. I want things to be changed, and I'm not funded by anybody, so I can speak my mind. Um, I have a question about do you go to an observatory? I think you have an observatory that you go to, uh, and that you
Yes,
show
we've
your
been to
students the
observatories.
stars. Okay,
Yep.
I want to ask about the lighting on that. So I have a photo that somewhere, I think it's on my website. I think it's a observatory in Ohio in the United States, and it has this red lighting. And the photo shows it looks pretty dark, and you can see these bollard style lights, and they're like a red. And I didn't know if those were LED red or if they were some incandescent with some kind of a filter on it or something like that. Um, if I show it to somebody, sort of a reaction might be, "Oh, that's so dark. How can you see? It's not safe." And yet, I think an observatory is one of the safest places you can go, right? I've been to observatories. I feel comfortable there. I can see fine. The lighting sort of matches the environment perfectly, and you guys aren't all dying up there on the observatory when you go. I think you're not, right? I think it's safe. Can you,
It's
do you
funny.
know about your own lighting up there, or who's in charge? And is it LED reds, or do you know anything about that?
Boy, oh boy. Okay. So we're potentially, the observatory that we have to take our students to is not the best example, seeing as it's atop a building, um, with a tower behind it, with an office tower behind it, and to the right is a city, and to the left is the university football field, which has basically anything below 40, 50 degrees altitude is just no. You're not going to get anything most of the time. So that's probably not the best example. Um, but I have been to the Roque de los Muchachos Observatory at La Palma, where we were on the William Herschel telescope some years ago, and I can tell you that there you see maybe the sky glow from the city at sea level. Other than that, it's like almost everything is completely dark. There's no windows. There's nothing in the observatory. So one thing that I remember very vividly is while we were there, and we were waiting for a series of observations to complete. I remember just going out on the roof next to the dome and just looking up, and it was the clearest, darkest night sky I'd ever seen, because there's no windows. The residencia just down the road has blackout curtains on it. And it's even recommended that you turn off or dip your headlights as you go up the mountain if you're driving back and forth the observatories. So yeah, it's very strictly controlled on actual observatories, but on our observatory at Exeter, slightly less so.
How do you, on your observatory, I'm sort of astonished. You have an observatory sort of in the city. How do you, how do you see through all the light pollution? And is it getting worse? Are you guys measuring it? Is it getting worse in your observatory?
So the first answer to that is we don't measure it because we would weep if we did. Um, I'm I mean, I'm sure it's getting worse, because we're going from this very we're going through a program of upgrades to LED in Devon in
You
the
mean
UK,
downgrades?
where I live. Upgrades. side grade. We're transitioning to LED.
Okay, there you
That's
go.
I'll say that. We're
Yeah.
transitioning to LEDs at the
Okay.
moment. And we're going from this very well constrained high pressure sodium or
Mm.
low pressure sodium line to broadband LED emission, which is doing a number on the sky glow situation
Hmm.
in Exeter. Um, so I really I do expect it's getting worse. We started when I started working on this project. We did start monitoring the kind of the sky brightness, uh, but that was after we'd started the transition. So I don't know what the outcome of that is just yet.
Hmm. It's some of this is why I say this 100-year issue. We're like the Moseses of the movement here, Mark. We're not going to see the promised land, but hopefully we're going to lay the groundwork for the future generations to solve this problem. There's so much momentum in the 5,000 Kelvin, 4,000 Kelvin lumens per watt high uniformity crowd. It's going to take a generational change in lighting designers to get rid of that. They just people it's they people have become obsessed with the relationship, the false relationship between safety and our electric light at night. And we know that it's not a simple relationship, but try to convince the public of that, very difficult to do. Try to convince policymakers of that, very difficult to do. Like if you're a port, you want to change to 5,000 K LEDs and point them out onto the ocean, and you kill every fish with 2 miles within the port because of the lights going out into the sea and pushing all the wildlife away from that area. But it's almost people feel like they have a right to have their damn torch, and their torch can be as bright as they want their damn torch to be. And because of why? Because I don't know, Christ is the light of the world. Because there's werewolves out there, vampires, I mean bats, I don't know what it is, but there's something in us that is irrational when it comes to light at night. And I love the models you're doing because it allow us to push into that rational world and show people things before they create these catastrophes of light pollution. But look, Mark, the first thing we have to do is stop doing damage, and this is why I tell the lighting industry. Right now, Dr. Morrell, there's a big movement in the lighting industry, the health effects of lighting, how we can improve human health with lighting. No. Stop doing damage. Let's stop the damage first. Because right now, electric light, I can quantify damage. I can't quantify any human health outcomes. And so, Dr. Morrell, we've made it to 45 minutes here. Do you have any final thoughts for the Restoring Darkness listeners before we sign off and ask them to become monthly donors, every single one of them?
I mean, I guess my parting message, as it always is with these kind of things, is just remember that this is this, like all big global issues, and this is a global issue.
Mm-hmm.
Light pollution, as I hope you'll see if you're listening to Michael and Mark here, is a global issue. But this is one of those issues where we actually genuinely all can play our part. So just being mindful of the lights that we install on our own properties, being mindful that they're not too bright, there's not too much glare to them. Being mindful that they are actually directed where you want them to be, and that you don't have excess light if you don't need it. We can all do our bit to try and help this problem.
And turn them off when you're sleeping. How about that?
Exactly, yeah. Turn them off when you don't need them.
Yeah, that's a good
Have
one
them
too.
only where and as bright as and as long as you need them.
I'd like you all to go while you're listening to this. I'd like you to go to restoringdarkness.com. You can check it out. Yeah, we're working on it. It's not the best website. We're working on it, okay? So we got a lot of priorities down here at the Lighting in Darkness Foundation. But you can donate to us by going to restoringdarkness.com and clicking the donate link. And why not become a monthly donor? That's right. We already have one. Why not have two? Why not have 1,000? And then we could see some magical things that we're going to do. Also, we're going to start having stories soon. We have a major court case in Rhode Island, folks. If that goes through, look out, because what's going to happen is we're going to move light pollution out of ordinances. That's right. Ordinances, they're like guidelines, okay? They're bylaws. We're going to move light pollution out of ordinance bylaws and into trespass law. That's right. Wouldn't that be amazing, Mark Baker, if we could say that light trespass is not a metaphor? According to this Rhode Island Superior Court, the Lighting in Darkness Foundation has now been told by the Superior Court that we're going to inspect your light trespass. You can't prevent us from going onto your property. Now, how crazy would that be, Mark, if we could prove to the Superior Court of Rhode Island that light trespass is trespass? Here's a photometric report showing that 60% of the light from this fixture here goes onto this person's property, and they have not given permission, Mark Baker, for their property illuminated by their neighbor's light. And 60% of the light from that goes onto this property, or 40%. And this is now a trespass. Wow, that would be so incredible if we were able to do that. So remember, folks, we're working hard. Go to restoringdarkness.com, and you can click the donate link and help us out. And we're on you know how Greg and I roll. If you listen to Greg Get a Grip on Lighting at all, which is the other show, you know that Greg and I, we do not stay in the ivory tower. We get right down in the trenches where it matters, where the lights are installed with the people that are there. That's what we do. So go to restoringdarkness.com. Greg and I are going to kick ass and take names. If this Rhode Island thing goes through, look out. But we're going to keep working on it if it doesn't. We're going to do it in Iowa. We'll do it in Texas. And one of these judges is going to push this thing forward into trespass law, and then it's over once we have that precedent. Also, check out softlights.org. Mark Baker, the man, the myth, the legend, is with us on the Restoring Darkness podcast now. So go to softlights.org to check out his work. And to all of you that made it all the way to the end, 47 minutes, I thank you very much for listening. Bye for now.